Well, welcome to another lesson of the Beginner's Guide to DXCP course. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, you can get a hold of me anytime you like, marcelo@headlesscreator.com. In today's lesson, an overview of accessibility in an omni-channel world presented by Rohit Ravikoti from Novvum. You will learn what accessibility is, why it's important, how to implement it across all your channels, plus lots more. So instead of me telling you all about that, why don't we just bring him in, have a quick conversation with him before we get started. Rohit, welcome back, man. You're part of the family.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
This is the third time, but you're a great presenter. You've got lots of information. You're always willing to share it, which we really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, so thank you for doing that. So today is all about accessibility, which is a very, very important topic that most of us, right, sometimes don't think about, but it is very important if you're coming from a different perspective, which is what you're going to be covering today, and also from the perspective of composability and how do you implement it in that architecture. But I also like to have a conversation with you real quick before we get started. Now, the first time I spoke to you, we talked about your background in tech, so they can go watch that one. Then we spoke a little bit about your hobbies, and they can go watch that. So today, let's just learn a little bit about what's your favorite food. Do you cook?
I cook a little bit, but
Okay.
I leave that up to to my wife. She does a
Okay.
much better
You're
job.
like me, because I eat, I don't cook.
Yeah.
Well, I
So,
cook a little bit, but I'm not sure if like boiling hot dogs counts as
yeah.
cooking.
Yeah, that's generally the level of cooking that I
Right.
do.
I can
Sometimes
relate.
I'll make some, something nice,
Yeah.
for my daughter and myself, but my
So
wife
what's your
usually
favorite
doesn't
food
know what
or that she makes for
I
you?
make. So my wife is Thai, so she makes some really good
Oh,
Thai
I love
food.
Thai food.
Yeah, so it's so I eat primarily like vegetarian and I'll eat fish occasionally too.
Oh,
So
okay. Oh, very
um
similar. My wife is Chinese, born in the U.S., but Chinese
ah,
background.
yeah.
But we eat all sorts. I mean, she's a great cook, and I'm from Argentina, so she can actually cook Argentinian food too.
Oh, that's
Now I'm
nice.
vegetarian, so it's very limited of the Argentinian food since it's mainly centered around meats, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
I like those Argentinian like empanadas and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that.
She
So,
actually made some for my son because he's not vegetarian with
oh
chicken
yeah.
and stuff. But people are like, "What the heck's going on here? Is this a food show or what?" And now everybody's hungry. It's not a food show. I just like to have a quick conversation with our presenter so you get to know him a little bit better. Okay, last question. You said you cook a little bit. What dish do you cook besides boiling hot dogs like me?
I make like a good like butternut squash soup, some like
Ooh, I love
lentils.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
My wife makes that. I love
Oh yeah.
butternut squash soup. Okay, enough because I'm starving already, Rohit. I'm going to go ahead and let you get started. We can see your presentation there. For those of you watching live, if you have any questions, whether it's about this or food, doesn't matter. Go ahead and ask it. I'll get Rohit to answer. Rohit, I'll let you get started and I'll jump in with questions.
All right, awesome. Okay, so yeah, I think Marcelo has done a great job of introducing this, and really, I wanted to dive into some of the opportunities as well as the challenges, right, with accessibility, especially with all of these new devices coming out. So let's kind of jump in, right? So we want to have a clear definition of what accessibility is. And really, it's just our ability to make digital platforms more accessible to people with disabilities, right? So, people who have visual, auditory, cognitive, or motor impairments, and making sure, because in a lot of ways, when they're using digital platforms, it's like they're looking at this from a completely different lens that may not be immediately apparent to us, right? It's like a whole different world. And as developers and people creating these things, we really look at it from our own perspective. So it's important to take that other side, because if we don't do that, we're really excluding a large group of people who really need the support. So today we're going to go into a few different things, right? So why is accessibility important? I touched on that earlier, but I'll really dive into some more of the details. There's kind of a standard, an international standard called WCAG that I'll go into, and some more country-specific ones. Accessibility, of course, in omnichannel. What are some of the best practices that you can you can use when thinking about accessibility, and of course, how that relates to composable architectures as well. So let's jump in. Okay, so why is accessibility important, right? And there's really three main reasons. There's business reasons. So, like I said, there's a large group of people who really need the accessibility functionality in order to be able to use your product or your app. And by incorporating those, you're really opening yourself up to a lot more users, and also a group of people who are used to not being served. Their needs aren't really being met. So if you take it one step beyond, they're going to be a huge loyal customer base for you. Um, there's also legal reasons. So especially if you're doing certain things in finance or medical and things like this, you're more often than not required to ensure that your platforms are accessible. And of course, there's an ethical reason for this, right? It's important that everything is really becoming digital more and more so today, and not really allowing this means that we're leaving a lot of people out. So, kind of diving into this, right? So, what are some of these legal things that are available, and what are some of the standards? So, the WCAG is kind of a standard international set of guidelines. Stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it kind of outlines, and I'll go into it in the next slide, but outlines what are some of the key things you should be looking out for in order to make sure that your systems meet certain requirements, right? So they really lay it out for us and make sure that it's easy to follow. And some of the country specific ones are like the ADA in the United States, AODA in Canada, and then Europe has one as well. So it's good to kind of do a little bit of research, especially if you're an organization that wants to be international. It's good to do a little bit of a research there. And for the WCAG, they've got kind of four key aspects that you should be looking at, right? So your platform should be perceivable, meaning it should be easy for all different users to know what's actually happening, right? So making sure you're using alternate text and describing different elements properly. You can add little annotations to things to make it more understandable. It should be operable, so not everybody's using a mouse or scrolling wheels. They could be just using their keyboard for certain reasons. So making sure that it's easy to operate in various different things is very critical. It's easy to understand, so the structure of your site, making sure that the text is readable, and it's easy to navigate. And of course, it has to be robust, right? So this is making sure that whatever content you have works well with different screen readers, because it's not just web that we're thinking about, right? It's mobile apps and so many other things. So making sure that it's really available across all of these different technologies available today. And that's what brings us into accessibility, right? So some of the things are, of course, web. This is kind of the most, I would say, well built out framework that we have because it's been around the longest. And then, mobile has been becoming kind of an increasingly used platform for many people. They come with screen readers, but many of the people I've spoken to who use them say that they leave a lot to be desired because things aren't built the right way, in order for them to be able to pick up on these tools, which I'll kind of go into. Um, and smart devices, things like voice activated tools, things like Amazon Alexa, Google Home, and all of these other tools, making sure you're using different cues, right? It's no longer just visual where you can work with a touch screen. So making sure they're able to hear certain tones, things like that. um, And then emerging technologies, I wanted to list this out here. There's still a lot of, R&D happening here. So, um, but things like virtual reality and augmented reality. So, some of the best practices, right? Really putting those principles, those WCAG principles into practice. There's a few things you can do to really get this right. So one of them, if you can incorporate, is audio feedback, right? To making sure that when somebody clicks on something or interacts with your site, they're not just seeing something, happening on the screen. They actually hear that, oh, okay, I did something here. Because oftentimes things could be stuck loading or whatever might be happening, and people may not know, right? If they're not able to see. Should be keyboard friendly, like I said. If they're tabbing through things, making sure you're outlining the CSS, because sometimes, when we're building things, it might look ugly that, oh, CSS is getting outlined when something is in focus. Well, there's a reason for that. So don't just do things to get rid of it. Make sure you have that, because that's for accessibility reasons. And then alt text, right? So on images, make sure you're describing what the image is, because people with visual um, disabilities are going to have a lot of difficulty with that. Variable fonts, so these are like the OTF fonts that you see. So these are ones where if people really need larger fonts, this font type is set up to be able to scale up and down as needed. So that's a really important one. Captions in videos, right? So people who may not be able to hear properly can at least read. So if you have videos or whatever it is that you're incorporating, make sure they have captions available. And then element structure. So this is very critical, because a lot of the screen readers and other tools out there rely on this pretty heavily to give people a sense of what's there, and how they can navigate through these things. So sometimes we could create elements that are styled a certain way, but you're still just using the wrong tags. Like you're not using H1 tags properly, and all these things. On mobile devices too, you can add annotations and links and so many other things to make sure that it's very easy to use and navigate. Error messages are also very important, because sometimes people may not know what's happening, right? So making sure they're very clear, easy to understand, and they know what to do is going to make a difference. And then high contrast interfaces, right? So these are things like just making sure that the text really stands out, easy to read, and not really getting washed out. So these are some important things to look at. And of course, some examples, I'd like to call out Airbnb, because not only do they think about accessibility on their website and mobile apps, they're also trying to make accessibility a big part of their physical spaces. So it's like a truly omni-channel experience, right? In the digital world as well as the physical world. And then, of course, like Microsoft, Apple, Google, they're the companies that are building the devices that we use today. So accessibility, of course, is a big part of what they do. And I'm sure they have a lot of research and development being done in this space. And
Real quick
yeah.
question, and if you're going to go into it, that's fine. I'll wait. But how do you test this? Obviously, there's guidelines that you can look up, right? You can that you spoke about that you can follow. But then, how do you test that it's actually implemented properly on your site, and people are able to, with these disabilities, people are able to still use your site appropriately?
Yeah, I mean, the best way, of course, is to get a few people to actually test your site with disabilities, right? So they can really look at these things. And of course, you can use the screen readers and those tools as well to do this. But no better thing than to find somebody who can actually do that. And there's services out there you can use, right? Just
Yeah, I was
to
going to ask you about
get
that,
people.
if there's services that are available.
Yeah, so there's a few out there, and I can kind of share the list. I'll include that in
We'll
the
add it
presentation.
to the description of
Right,
this lesson so people can look it up. Great, thank you.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
yeah, those are
Thanks.
some. sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then, when we talk about composable, that adds a whole new layer, right? Because what it's doing is it's incorporating, you know, data and information from so many different sources, uh, out, kind of aggregating that and then displaying it to many other types of devices. So this middle layer that we're talking about that composes all of these things really needs to be robust and make sure that you can keep everything consistent, right? So, and that's really where the power of this comes in, because you can use, like Airbnb, for instance, uses what's called a backend driven UI, where they really clearly define every element that needs to go into the page. In a lot of ways, they kind of they don't just code these static views into their apps. They're actually asking their backend system what to render and what to display. So this is great because you can incorporate all of these accessibility features into it and have a generalized structure that can be used to create any screens that you need. And what's great about that is it can all be done, with your backend team, or, with your kind of your content team, to make sure that, okay, I want to be showing them this information. Here's all of these accessibility annotations that we should be having. And then all of that gets automatically incorporated, right? So you don't have to have somebody go in manually adding these tags to each element, but have a really good system to put it into place. Now, I know I kind of went through this pretty quickly, but those are some of the key things to really keep in mind, right? People with visual disabilities and hearing and speaking. So,
Now,
yeah,
what if you
Marcella.
have, what if you have, you're an international company, right? How do you keep up with the different standards across different parts of the world? Because there's different legal entities you have to work with, right? Some things you have to do. You mentioned at the beginning the legality versus the morality, the ethical part of it, right? That you want to do as a company. But there's some things that you have to legally do, and if you're an international company with a composable architecture, how do you keep track of that? Where do you stay up to date with that, and how do you comply to this stuff? And we're not giving legal advice, but just an idea of how
Right.
to do this.
Yeah, I mean, there's like tools available, right? So there's something called Accessibility, which does a great job of making you compliant to this, internationally. Primarily, they work on the web, but there's also a lot of resources available, which kind of tell you, okay, based on the countries that you're in, these are the regulations that you should be looking at, right? So there's companies that can actually help you become compliant and focus on these things. So few different options. If you just want something off the shelf and you're mostly on the web, you can use an off the shelf tool like Accessibility to, just tie it in. I think they have a pretty easy integration process.
Maybe we can add some of those resources to that list that you're going to
Yeah.
provide us. So we'll provide it for everybody. One last thing is, if there's a don't do this, what would that be?
Um,
Well, two. Don't do this, and then
I,
do this. Make sure you do
yeah.
this if it's only one thing you do.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think the main thing is make sure you get your site tested by somebody
Right.
who really uses these accessibility tools, right? Especially with various different disabilities. It's very important that you have somebody actually look at that and use it. When I say don't do it, I think don't do it is don't not pay attention to this stuff, right?
Right.
Because I think a lot of times we're in such a rush to get something out there and do it. So like really take the time to focus on this, because especially when you're designing it, make sure you incorporate that into your design process.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Rohit, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. I think you officially can now be the host of this course. This is your third one, so I don't think you need me anymore. You can just take over.
Yeah, I
No,
think you're really trying to push me into a new job role
I think
here,
so.
huh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're so good at it. No, seriously, Rohit, you did great. We really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge with the community. And if people want to get a hold of you, the email that you're showing there is the best.
Yep.
Also, any other social media you'd like to tell them to go check out? Obviously, Novvum.io, they should go check out.
Yeah, check out Novvum.io, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I think the link to that is
Right.
going to be
You're active there. Cool.
Yep.
All right,
So,
Rohit, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
all right. Thank you so much, Marcelo.
And thanks to the rest of you. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. And as always, if you want to get a hold of me, go ahead and email me, marcelo@headlesscreator.com. Have a good one, everybody. Cheers.